I never thought I'd be the kind of person to tell this story, but if you're reading this, perhaps you're also a mother who once loved too much, gave too much, and was treated like she was nothing. I paid $93,000 for my son's wedding. Everything from the wedding dress and the cake to the venue, the live band, and even the honeymoon. I did it all in silence, not because I needed the credit, but because I believed that if I quietly stood in the background, he would feel the love. But on that day, I was asked to leave the wedding hall by my own son. Not a word of thanks, not even a glance. Just a soft-spoken sentence as cold and hard as steel. Mom, your name isn't on the guest list. And I had believed I would be a part of his happiest day. If you're reading this, please tell me, have you ever done something good only to have the person you love most turn their back on you? Leave a comment and let me know. I need to believe I'm not alone. This is my story, the story of a mother who stood on the sidelines of her only beloved son's wedding. My name is Marjorie Whitlock. I'm 67 years old. I live alone in a single-story house in South Raleigh, North Carolina. My husband Arthur and I used to run a small laundromat on the corner of Maple and 4th. We started with just one old industrial washer and a few folding wooden chairs, and eventually grew it into a chain of 7 shops across town. 12 years ago, Arthur had a heart attack one winter morning. The nurse said he went quickly without any pain. I sat in my car for hours afterward, holding a cold McDonald's coffee, my mind completely blank. Since that day, I've lived alone. I have one son, Chase. He is my only child, and for many years he has been both my greatest pride and my deepest heartache. Chase was a bright, quick-witted kid. He earned a scholarship to the state university, majoring in finance. When he got his acceptance letter, he hugged me, kissed my cheek, and said, "I'm going to make you proud, Mom." I just didn't know that making you proud meant leaving me behind. I still remember the first time I visited his dorm. I brought him a blanket I had hand-knitted from dark blue wool, his favorite color when he was a boy. Chase smiled and accepted it politely, but I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. Embarrassment. As I was leaving, I overheard him whisper to his roommate, "My mom knitted it." "It's a little homespun. You know, I never knitted another blanket after that." After graduation, Chase got a job at an insurance firm and was promoted quickly. He started dressing like he belonged in the big city, his hair always slicked back, his posture impeccable. Our phone calls grew shorter. He still called me. Mom still sent birthday cards, but they always came with the line, "I'm busy, Mom. You get it right." Then one day in early April he called. "Mom, I have some good news. Did you get another promotion?" "No, this time it's marriage." I sat up straight. My heart hammered in my chest, a mix of joy and anxiety. "To whose son, Paulina Redley?" "You'll love her. Her family is very established. Don't you worry, the wedding will be perfect. Her side is handling most of it." That phrase, "handling most of it," felt like a gentle reminder that I wasn't to concern myself too much. Paulina. The name sounded like it was plucked from a fashion magazine. I had never met her, only seen a few photos. Chase sent blonde hair, a slender frame, a pleated skirt that fell to her knees. She had a sharp look in her eyes, the kind that made working-class mothers like me hesitate, wondering if I'd ever be good enough for them. Despite my reservations, I was happy for him. What mother doesn't want her only child to settle down? So I decided to do the only thing I could help him quietly, in a way he couldn't refuse. I drove to the offices of Pearl Weddings, located on the edge of a newly built commercial district. The reception area smelled of vanilla. The front desk gleamed, and the staff smiled at me with a "you're holding up well for your age" kind of smile. A young woman named Rachel, probably in her late 20s, wearing a simple beige dress and her hair in a small braid, greeted me. "I'd like to speak with you privately," I said, "about the wedding of Chase Whitlock and Paulina Redley. I'm the groom's mother." Rachel looked at me. Her lips pursed as if searching her memory, then nodded. "Of course, what can I help you with?" I pulled a detailed hand-notated folder from my purse listing every expense I intended to cover. I didn't want to haggle. I just wanted everything to be perfect for my son. "But I have one condition," I said, looking Rachel in the eye. "My name is not to be mentioned. All payments should be listed under an anonymous benefactor." Rachel blinked. "You want to keep all of this a secret?" I nodded. "Chase won't accept the money directly. He has his pride. But this wedding is the biggest day of his life. I want him to be happy. I don't need to be mentioned." Rachel spoke softly. "Most people want their children to be grateful. You're the first person I've met who wants to remain in the shadows." I smiled. "I just want him to remember what it feels like to be loved." We signed the papers and Rachel went over the payment schedule. I left as a light rain began to fall. I didn't have an umbrella, but I didn't mind. I thought about the wedding day. I pictured my son beaming, embracing his bride, greeting his guests, and I would be there somewhere at the back of the room watching him quietly. That would be enough. I never imagined that even a place at the back of the room was too much to ask for. I never thought I would feel so out of place at my own son's wedding. But from the moment I stepped into the lobby of the Belgrave Hotel, I felt like I was in the wrong place. I wore a burgundy dress I'd bought the week before at a boutique for mature women, the kind of dress I never thought I'd wear, but I wanted to look presentable. My hair was tied in a neat bun at the nape of my neck, secured with my mother's old pearl clip. I had also draped the moss-green silk scarf Arthur bought me for our 30th anniversary around my shoulders. It was a private comfort. The night before I had hung it on a chair by my bed and just looked at it for hours, as if it were a thread, connecting me to him, as if Arthur would be walking with me to our son's wedding. I carried a white envelope containing a check for $5,000. I had written by hand for my 2 children, Marjorie. I knew my son didn't need the money. Paulina surely had much more, but I wanted to contribute a small part to their honeymoon. Not for show, but because I still wanted to be a part of his life, even if it was just as a silent, blurred background. I arrived 30 minutes early thinking I could avoid the crowds and noise. But as soon as I walked through the grand glass doors of the hotel lobby, I knew I didn't belong. Women in form-fitting dresses and high heels, their hair styled in glossy curls. Men in black suits wearing watches so heavy, their wrists seemed to bear an extra weight. A few people glanced at me, their eyes scanning me as if trying to guess. Is she with the bride's family? I doubt anyone there remembered me cleaning the laundromat when Chase was in 4th grade because we couldn't afford a janitor. No one knew I had slept on a wooden bench for nights on end because a machine broke in the middle of winter and I couldn't bear to go home until it was fixed. And I didn't think anyone here wanted to know. I walked to the reception desk. A young woman with a Clarissa name tag gave me a practiced customer service smile. "May I have the name for the party, ma'am? I'm the mother of the groom. Marjorie Whitlock." Clarissa typed something into her computer, then tilted her head. "I'm sorry, ma'am, but I don't see your name on the guest list." I blinked. My heart slowed to a crawl. I managed a weak smile. There must be a mistake. The mother of the groom. I wouldn't need to be on a list. "Yes, but my instructions are to only allow guests with an invitation into the reception area. Please wait just a moment." She picked up the phone to call someone. I stood frozen, the envelope in my hand growing damp with sweat. People around me started to stare. I heard someone whisper, "Is that the groom's mother?" Their tone was the same one people used to discuss a misplaced dish at a buffet. A little girl in cream-colored patent leather shoes toddled past me. Her shoes clicked against the polished marble floor. She bent down, picked something up, and ran over to me. "Ma'am, this is for you." She handed me a small white plastic flower, probably fallen from a bouquet. I looked at her, then at the flower. a discarded, unnoticed trinket picked up by a child and offered as the purest of gestures. I smiled faintly and bent down. "Thank you, sweetie." The little girl ran off, disappearing back into the sea of silken suits. Just then, I heard a voice. "Mom." I turned. It was Chase. He was wearing a charcoal gray suit, his tie matching the shade of Paulina's dress I'd seen in photos. His face tightened when he saw me. I could read the expression perfectly. It was the same one he'd had when he held the blanket I'd knitted and whispered, "It's a little homespun. What are you doing here? I came for your wedding son. Did you forget?" Chase glanced quickly toward the reception desk, then gently placed a hand on my elbow, guiding me to a corner of the lobby. His voice dropped as if he didn't want anyone to overhear, but his words were crystal clear. "Mom, I thought we understood. This wedding, it's on another level. It's an event for Paulina's family, my friends from the firm, her father's colleagues." I looked into his eyes. He didn't have to finish the sentence. He didn't need to. I understood. I didn't fit in this setting. I didn't belong here. Just then, Paulina walked over. She wore a stunning, form-fitting gown of pure white lace, her hair in soft waves, her lips a shade of dusty rose, just like in the bridal magazines. She smiled. "Oh, Mrs. Whitlock, it's a shame we won't be seeing you at the reception. But it was so sweet of you to stop by." She didn't ask me to stay. Not at all. I turned back to Chase. He avoided my gaze. I took a deep breath. A heat rose in my throat, but I held my composure. I placed the envelope in his hand, gently, as if I were handing over a piece of my heart. "I wish you both a lifetime of happiness." Then I turned and walked away. No one stopped me. No one asked me to stay. There were only stares at my back and the small white plastic flower clutched in my hand. I walked slowly, each step feeling like it was crushing my own dignity, yet I tried not to let anyone see. I was the mother of the groom, and no one wanted me there. I got home around 4 in the afternoon. I didn't turn on the lights or the heat. I let the pale, late-afternoon sun filter through the living room curtains. Still in my dress, I took off my shoes, sat down in the old cream-colored armchair, the one Arthur used to read the paper in, and let the silence soak into my tired bones. I didn't cry, not because I was strong. It was just that some heartaches leave you so empty there are no tears left to cry. On the wall in front of me was a small collection of photos. A young Chase in the yard wearing a red cowboy hat. That boy used to smile so brightly. Arthur holding him on his shoulders during a picnic at Jordan Lake Park. And in the center the photo I treasured most, the 3 of us, on the day we opened our second laundromat. I remembered that day clearly. I was wearing sneakers, my hair in a high ponytail, my back damp with sweat from cleaning and doing the books. Arthur had his arm around my shoulder. Chase stood between us, hugging a cash box full of coins. 3 faces, 3 smiles. I lifted the frame, wiped a thin layer of dust from the glass, and sat back down, my hand resting on the edge as if holding on to a fragile memory. Arthur's voice echoed in my head, that deep, slow, and sometimes knowing tone of his. "We can't make Chase a blue blood, Marge," he'd once said, "but we can raise him to be a good man." He had just finished patching an exhaust pipe behind an industrial dryer, his face smudged with grease. I had been complaining that Chase was being teased at school for not having brand-name clothes. He said that, handed me a glass of water, and sat down beside me, leaning against the wall. I had believed him. I believed Arthur. I believed in goodness. I believed a mother's love could save a child from insecurity, from losing his way. But it seemed I was wrong. I set the photo down, stood up, and filled the kettle. While waiting for it to boil, I opened a kitchen drawer and pulled out the payment summary from Pearl Weddings. It was all there. The hotel, the caterer, the photographer, the florist, the band. Total $93,000. I picked up my phone and dialed my private bank. My account manager was a man named Mr. Brennan, an older gentleman whose voice always sounded like he was reading the fine print of a contract. Mrs. Whitlock, good afternoon. How can I help you? I need to cancel all payments related to today's event. All charges coded from W. Pearl to W. Belgrave. There was a moment of silence on the other end. May I ask the reason for this, ma'am? The reason, I said softly without a trace of bitterness, is that the person paying the bills was kicked out of her own son's wedding. He cleared his throat, ever the professional. I understand. I will begin the process immediately. A few deposits may be non-refundable, but the majority of the funds can be recovered. How much will I lose? Approximately $5,000 to $7,000 for the deposits. But the larger sums can be saved. Proceed. I'm prepared to cover the fees. Very well. I will send a confirmation via email. Is there anything else I can assist you with? I hesitated, then said, I'd like to set up a scholarship fund for my niece, Lena Whitlock. She's studying architecture and still has her third-year tuition to pay. And the name of the fund, I looked out the window. The sky was turning gray. The wind gently swayed the weeping willows in the front yard. The Marjorie Fund for the Child Who Listens. Mr. Brennan paused, then let out a soft chuckle. I like the sound of that. After a sip of weak tea, I called the office of Pearl Weddings. The receptionist answered and transferred me to Rachel. Her voice faltered when I introduced myself. Mrs. Whitlock, I thought, I didn't think I would hear from you again. I took a long, deep breath. Rachel, I'm calling to cancel the entire contract. Every service, every payment. I understand. But what happened? Everything is still underway. The dinner reception starts at 6. I was asked to leave the wedding hall. By my own son. There was no invitation for me. No apology. So there is no reason for me to continue paying for a celebration that was not for me. Rachel was silent for a long moment. I could almost hear her swallow. I'm so sorry, Mrs. Whitlock. I had no idea. If I had known, I would have... It's not your fault, I interrupted. You were just doing your job. I looked down at my teacup. The leaves hadn't fully steeped. The bitterness was still faint. You can tell them the person who was standing in the shadows was pushed out the door. And now, that person is no longer standing there. Rachel's voice was hoarse. I am truly sorry. I smiled, though no one could see it. I don't need an apology. I need to be free. That evening, I didn't turn on the television. I didn't eat dinner. I just sat by the window, opened the scholarship fund application on my computer, and filled in Lena's information, selecting tuition plus living expenses as the purpose. When I finished, I received a confirmation email from the bank. $86,000 has been transferred to the Lena Whitlock Support Fund to be activated within 24 hours. I stared at that line for a long time. I wasn't happy, but for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I had finally done the right thing for myself. Not for Chase, not to make him love me again, but to stop hoping a child would be good just because I had been good to him. I shut down my computer, stood up, and picked up the small white plastic flower, the one the little girl had given me this morning, and placed it in a glass of water on the windowsill. It wasn't beautiful, it wasn't elegant, but it was exactly where it belonged. And for today, that was enough. I still remember the kitchen clock ticking past 6:00 p.m. The second hand swept steadily across the white face. My tea was cold. I didn't drink it. I didn't turn on the lights. Outside, the setting sun cast long shadows across the old wooden table. In my mind, though I tried not to, an image of the wedding reception began to form. I could picture Paulina descending the grand staircase at the Belgrave, her long train trailing behind her, fresh flowers in her hand, as an expensive piano melody played softly. Everything was like a movie. Except for the one thing that made the whole film a lie, the mother who had bankrolled the entire production had been denied entry. And then, less than 40 minutes later, my phone buzzed. It was Lena. I answered. Her voice was drowned out by noise in the background, and I almost didn't recognize it through the chaos. Grandma, I don't know how to say this. Everything. It's all falling apart. I gripped the phone, sitting up straighter. What is it, Lena? The hotel staff just walked in and started clearing the tables, pulling off the tablecloths, taking down the floral centerpieces. They said they never received payment confirmation. I let out a slow, long breath. On the other end, Lena lowered her voice. Paulina fainted. She stood up and just collapsed. Her mother started screaming, "You low-class people, this is some dirty trick from the groom's mother." I heard this and felt no anger. Only a quiet sadness, like a blanket being pulled off my shoulders on a cold night. I said softly, "It was meant to fall apart, dear. Nothing can stand if it's built on denial. If they wanted to erase me from their perfect day, then that perfect day couldn't remain intact." There was a pause on the other end. Then Lena spoke again, her voice trembling. "Grandma, did you—" "Yes," I said without hesitation. "I canceled everything." I heard Lena catch her breath. She must have stepped into a quiet corner of the hall. "You paid for all of it." "Yes, everything. The venue, the flowers, the music, the dress, the honeymoon. But no one wanted me in their picture, so I quietly stepped out of the frame." Lena whispered, "Oh my God." At that very moment, back at the Belgrave, a guest named Brittany, a beauty influencer in her early 20s, had her phone out recording the chaos in the ballroom, the confused waiters pulling napkins from tables, guests standing up bewildered as the soft ambient lighting was replaced by the harsh bare-bones light from the service fixtures overhead. And then in the center of the frame, Paulina collapsed next to her chair, her wedding dress knocking over a glass of water that splashed across the floor. Brittany posted that clip to TikTok with the caption, "Groom's mom secretly paid for the wedding, got kicked out, then pulled the plug on everything." It was only 27 seconds long, but it spread like a summer wildfire. Over 400,000 views in the first 2 hours with more than 2,000 comments. Someone even screenshotted faces from the clip, zooming in to comment on the bride's mother's expression, the shock on the maid of honor's face, and the bewildered look in Chase's eyes as he stood in the middle of it all, as if the ground had been pulled out from under him. On Facebook, someone reposted the clip with the comment, "This is why I've always believed if you disrespect the person who raised you, they will remind you of the first lesson in character with their checkbook." I don't have social media. I didn't see any of this. But Lena told me about it piece by piece. Her voice shifted from outrage to pity to something choked with emotion. "They're calling you boss grandma, you know." Someone commented, "She's a living legend." Another person said, "I hope I have the guts to be as strong as her if I'm ever betrayed." I smiled to myself. I didn't want to be a legend. I just wanted to live with decency. And when that decency was rejected, I chose to stand up and walk away. Late that night, Lena called again. Her voice was still shaky. "Grandma, are you okay? I'm better than I've been in a long time, dear." "Do you regret it?" I thought for a moment. "No. I'm only sad that the person I gave birth to no longer recognizes the person who raised him." On the other end of the line, I heard Lena sniffle. Then she ended the call with a promise to check in later. She was young, but she understood. She was the piece of decency I had left on a day when I thought I had nothing. I turned off the lights and looked at the plastic flower on the windowsill, the same one the little girl had given me. Outside, the city lights still glowed, but I knew that somewhere out there a wedding was growing dark. And in here, a mother had stepped out of the shadow of unconditional forgiveness and chosen freedom. The next morning I woke up earlier than usual. No alarm clock, no bright sun. I just couldn't sleep. My mind was racing even though my body was exhausted. I brewed a strong pot of coffee and set it on the wooden table by the window. I didn't turn on the TV. I didn't check my phone. There was only the ticking of the wall clock and the smell of hot coffee mingling with the pale morning light. I sat like that for a long time, until Lena called. "Grandma, you need to look at your phone," she said, her voice urgent. "Everyone is talking about you." I picked up my phone, opening my email app first, as was my habit. There were over 60 unread emails, but one subject line made me pause. "I am so sorry. Rachel Pearl Weddings." I opened it. The message was brief, but it was enough to stop me in my tracks. "Mrs. Whitlock, after what happened last night, I can no longer represent their wedding project. The way they treated you was unacceptable. I resigned this morning. I just wanted you to know that not everyone stays silent. In my eyes, you were the one who acted with more character than anyone else in that room." I put the phone down, my hand tightening around my coffee mug. It wasn't exactly joy I felt, but something in my heart felt lighter, as if a stranger had spoken a truth for me that my own family couldn't bring themselves to say. Not long after Lena sent me a link, it was another TikTok post, but this time it wasn't from Brittany, the blonde influencer. It was from an anonymous account, @waiter-on-duty. The clip was short, but its content was what made the internet explode. "I was a server at the wedding at the Belgrave last night. I was the one who personally received the final service confirmation from the planner, and the payment schedule clearly listed the benefactor, Marjorie Whitlock. Not the bride's family, not the bride, the groom's mother. She arrived early, sat in a corner of the lobby, didn't speak to anyone, just held an envelope. When she was asked to leave, she just smiled faintly. No scene, no protest. But I saw it, her eyes were red. As she stood up, she touched the green scarf around her neck. No one stopped her. No one walked her out. I've never seen someone leave their own child's wedding so quietly. But I know something else. 2 weeks before the wedding, my manager called to confirm the payment details. I accidentally dialed the bride's number, Paulina. She told me clearly, "I know the groom's mother is paying, just keep it quiet. Don't put anyone's name on it. No need to tell the groom." I didn't dare say anything that night, but when I saw her being turned away, I knew. I couldn't stay silent anymore. The internet erupted. The bride knew and still let her mother-in-law get kicked out. I thought the groom was the main villain. Now I get it. They both deserved this. This is the most spectacular takedown I have ever seen. The most heartbreaking part, she wasn't just betrayed by her son, her future daughter-in-law knew and stayed silent. Beneath the post, the user attached a photo of the payment schedule along with a PDF of the invoice from Pearl Weddings. My signature was on it, along with the note, "Anonymous benefactor, per request M. Whitlock." I don't know what caused the bigger explosion, the fact that the groom's mother paid for everything, or the fact that she was kicked out by her own son. The comments flooded in. What kind of person is this bride? Are they even human? This is why I'd never marry into fake money. The one genuine person gets treated like dirt. Mrs. Marjorie, you are not alone. You exposed a whole room of hypocrites. Someone created a Facebook fan page called Team Grandma Marjorie, where people shared their own family stories, times they were turned away by loved ones, and memories of mothers who sacrificed in silence, never to be acknowledged. A short clip of me leaving the hotel, likely from a security camera, also began to circulate. Though the angle was distant and blurry, many people recognized me, walking slowly, clutching a white envelope, wearing a simple dress and a neatly tied silk scarf. I read one comment that made me pause. Sometimes silence is the most profound revenge. I didn't reply to Chase's messages. There were at least 3 missed calls from his number. No voicemail, no texts. But I knew he knew. And now he was floundering in the chaos of a life he thought he had scripted to perfection. Lena told me Paulina has locked all her social media accounts, and Chase is being tagged in comments calling him the ungrateful son of the year. I didn't feel happy hearing that, but I didn't feel guilty either. I didn't create that mob. Chase did when he chose to erase his mother's name from the guest list, but still sign off on invoices bearing her name. That afternoon, as I was out back watering my chrysanthemums, I saw my phone buzz on the windowsill. A new text from an unknown number. I was the server from last night. Thank you for your quiet dignity. I just did what I felt was right. I hope you find peace. I stood still for a moment, then typed back, thank you. I didn't need to be defended, but I appreciate your honesty. That night I couldn't sleep early. I walked around the house looking at the old photos. Arthur standing in front of the laundromat beaming. 4-year-old Chase in a superhero costume hugging my neck tightly. And me sitting on a wooden bench, a ledger in my lap, my hair a mess. I touched each frame. The people in them were no longer the same, but I kept the pictures. Not out of nostalgia, but because I couldn't forget who I once was and who I had once loved so deeply. I didn't go online that night. I didn't need more praise, more comments. I was only sure of one thing. The truth, no matter how late it arrives, is the only thing that can keep you standing. And this time, it had arrived right on time. I was sorting through some papers for Lena's scholarship fund when a frantic banging echoed from the front door. Not a polite knock. This was a fist pounding with anger and impatience. I glanced at the wall clock, 7 a.m. I knew who it was. I walked slowly to the door, calmly adjusting the collar of my cardigan. I wasn't scared. I wasn't angry. I just felt a new layer of stillness inside me, something I hadn't possessed during my many years as a mother. Chase stood on the porch. His shirt was wrinkled. His tie loosened, his eyes red from lack of sleep. The face of my son, the boy who once ran around my backyard in red plastic boots with a radiant smile, was now crumpled like someone who had just swallowed something bitter. He pointed a finger at me, nearly shouting. "What did you do?" I didn't answer. I opened the door wider and turned, walking back into the house. He followed, slamming the door behind him. His footsteps were a frantic, confused rhythm on the hardwood floor. I didn't invite him to sit. I didn't ask if he wanted coffee. I poured myself a cup of herbal tea, back to him. Chase stood there, his voice rushed. "You ruined my wedding. You made Paulina's mother faint. You made the guests leave you. Let the whole world know our family business." I set my teacup down gently. "No, son. I didn't ruin anything. I simply withdrew what I gave. And I believe adults have to take responsibility for what they build. You built a wedding without me in it, so it's only logical that it would collapse without me." He was speechless for a second, then said, his voice lower, "But did you have to do it like that? Pull the money on the day of the wedding. While everyone was there, I was there too, Chase. I was also there, but no one let me stay. No one invited me in. Do you remember?" He pressed his lips together, turning away to lean his hands on the kitchen counter. I looked at my grown son. He looked like a man who had just lost everything but had no idea why. "Paulina," he sighed. She didn't know. She didn't know you were the one paying. She thought her parents were covering it all." I remained silent. If you had just told me from the start, maybe things would have been different. I turned and looked him straight in the eye. "Do you remember when I brought you that hand-knitted blanket to your dorm?" Chase blinked. He said nothing. "I heard you tell your roommate it was a little homespun," I continued. "From that day on, I knew you didn't want your country mom showing up in your new life, and I respected that. But you don't get to erase me from your life and still spend my money as if it belongs to someone else." I walked over to a wooden cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. "This is the bill for the honeymoon. 14 nights in Venice at a 5-star hotel with a room overlooking the canal. Business class flights. It all came to over $16,000, which I also paid for. And then there's this Paulina's custom-made wedding dress for $8,200. The 5-tier wedding cake that you were showing off all over social media, that was $2,500. I laid each document on the table, each line item clear, each dollar amount specific. Everything you two were so proud to show off that day, it was all from me. I didn't need a thank you, but I didn't deserve to be kicked out like a stranger from a wedding I was bankrolling. Chase froze. The color drained from his face. His hands trembled slightly. "Do you know what they're saying on social media?" he asked. "I do. They're calling me an ungrateful son. They made a fan page for you. They're cursing me out." "Mom, do you understand?" I nodded. "Then now you know what it feels like to be judged without a chance to explain. Just like me standing in that lobby being told my name wasn't on the list." A long silence filled the room. Chase slumped into a chair as if he'd just fallen from a great height. I poured more tea into my cup. "Did you come here to ask me to fix this?" "Yes," he said softly. "At least pay the venue again. To get some dignity back. So Paulina me won't be so ashamed in front of her parents." I looked at my son. I saw the child in him lost, scared, and trying to cling to the very thing he had rejected. I didn't speak right away. I took a slow sip of tea, then I shook my head. I can't give back something I took away because of a lack of respect. I'm not angry, but I'm not going back. I stood up, gathered the papers from the table, and neatly filed them back in the cabinet. I don't want you to pay for one mistake for the rest of your life, but I can't let you live without consequences. The day you erased me from your wedding picture, you decided I had no value. Now you're learning that sometimes the person who isn't in the picture is the one holding it all up. Chase dropped his head to the table. He wasn't crying, but his hands gripped the chair so tightly it was as if he were weathering a great storm inside in himself. I walked to the door and opened it. "You should go and think." He stood up, but before he left, he looked at me. I don't want to lose you, Mom." My voice was steady as I replied, "Then you shouldn't have let me walk away from your wedding alone." When the door closed, I leaned against the wall. I didn't cry. But for the first time in years, I felt like I was standing in my own rightful place, no longer a shadow behind my son, but a woman who knew how to hold on to her own self-respect. And that, it hurt. But it was also necessary. I'm not the kind of person who enjoys watching others suffer their comeuppance, not even those who have hurt me. I take no pleasure in seeing the guilty pay a price, but I do believe in the laws of life. What you sow, you will eventually reap. And Chase, my son, was reaping. 2 weeks after he showed up at my house, everything began to fall apart in that quiet, cold, and methodical way things do in America. I heard from Lena that Paulina had moved back to her parents' house in Wilmington, taking her things with her just 2 days after the tabloids started running stories about the bride who fainted at her canceled $1 million wedding. Lena sent me a link to an online article with a glaring red headline, "When the groom's mom pays the bills and gets banned from the wedding." The sub-headline read, "A lavish union collapses before guests' eyes when its moral foundation is pulled away." I didn't read the whole article. I didn't need to. I had lived it. I didn't ask about Chase, but news found its way to me the way it always does in a town this size sooner or later. Chase was transferred out of the main office in downtown Raleigh. Not fired. Just moved to a small branch in a town near the South Carolina border. I heard his salary was cut in half. His authority to approve claims was revoked. No more private office, no more high-profile clients. My neighbor across the street, Mr. Sanders, who used to ask me, "Chase is still doing great at that firm right now," just gave me a slight nod when we passed in our front yards, then averted his eyes. I understood. People were uncomfortable, or maybe they were embarrassed for me. The same people who once praised Marjorie's boy so successful, promoted so fast, no longer mentioned his name. It was as if once his golden halo faded, they no longer needed its light. One evening I was checking my email and saw a new message. From Chase Whitlock, subject Mom. I opened it. Mom, I know I was wrong. I messed up. I ruined everything. Paulina left. The company demoted me. They said they don't trust me anymore. Everyone says I'm a terrible son. But I just wanted to do the right thing. I didn't think it would turn out like this. Mom, I need you. I'm sorry. If you don't write back, I get it, but I'm sorry. I just hope you know I see it now. I see all of it. The last line was just one word, son. The email was full of typos. He probably wrote it on his phone or in a moment of panic. I didn't know. But what made me pause the longest was how he used the word mom for the first time without capitalizing it, without that formal distance. It was soft. It was real, like when he was a little boy. I read that email 5 times, then I shut down the computer. I didn't reply. Not because I wanted to punish him, but because some apologies, if they only come after you've lost everything, are no longer apologies. They are pleas for a lifeline. And I refused to be loved like a life raft. 3 days later, Lena called. Her voice was small. I knew she didn't want to tell me, but she did anyway. Grandma, I was driving past Dad's old office, and I saw him sitting in his car, alone. The engine was off, the window was cracked. He was smoking. I just stood there for almost 5 minutes. He didn't see me. He was just staring out at the lake, not blinking. He looked lost. I was silent for a long moment. Did you talk to him? I asked. No. I didn't know where to start. And honestly, I'm still angry. Angry that he let you walk away like that. Angry that he won't grow up. But seeing him like that, I felt sorry for him too. I sighed. My heart felt like it had been squeezed, then released a gentle, aching pain. Everyone needs to hit their bottom, Lena. Some people need a fall. Some people need a wound. If your father is hitting his, then maybe it's necessary. Do you think he's really sorry? I don't know, I said slowly. But I think for the first time in his life, your father is starting to realize that money can't buy everything. And the people who truly matter are the ones you can't measure by their social value. That night, I printed out the email and put it in a drawer. I didn't tear it up, I didn't reply, but I didn't delete it either. I kept it like a small piece of evidence of something I had once hoped for and had now let go of. I looked up at the photo of the 3 of us, me, Arthur, and Chase, on the day we opened our first laundromat. I was smiling radiantly. Arthur had his arm around me, and Chase was hugging a big teddy bear, a gift from a customer. That little boy, where had he gone? I didn't know. But the mother in that photo, the one who once believed she could give her son everything except the wisdom that comes with growing up, was still here. And for the first time in her life, she knew she didn't have to wait for her child to come back anymore. I left Raleigh on a quiet, breezy morning in March. There was no emotional farewell, no massive moving truck. Just me, my old silver SUV, 3 cardboard boxes, a canvas bag of kitchen supplies, and a single picture frame, me, Arthur, and Chase, on the day our first laundromat opened. I moved to Paulina, Georgia, a place I'd never been but had always heard was warm, historic, and slow enough to start living again. I rented a small house on the outskirts of town with a backyard big enough for a few lavender bushes and some summer tomato plants. The house was painted cream with a gray tin roof and a wooden porch with a rocking chair. It wasn't fancy, but the first time I stepped inside, I felt like I could breathe. The first few days I didn't do much besides walk around the neighborhood taking note of the local grocery, the pharmacy, and the used bookstore. I chose not to bring a television. I didn't need the news. I didn't need the noise. On a Tuesday afternoon, I went to the nearby community center. They offered a free watercolor class for seniors. I signed up. At the time, my thinking was simple. My hands still work. My eyes can still see color, so why not? The class had only 8 people, all women over 50. The first person I befriended was Judith, 60 years old, with curly salt and pepper hair, who always wore a striped button-down shirt and clacked around in Birkenstocks. Judith had been divorced twice, had no children, and lived alone with 3 cats and an electric organ. She wasn't shy about saying, "I don't believe in forever love anymore, but I do believe in making a good cup of coffee every morning, and that's enough." I laughed, and from that moment we were friends. Judith was the one who first invited me to go hiking, something I had never done in my life. Do you know what it feels like to stand on top of a hill with the wind on your face and not need anyone beside you? The peace of it, she asked. I shook my head. The next day I put on my sneakers, packed a small backpack, and climbed that hill with Judith. It wasn't very high. But when I stood at the top looking down at the thick green canopy of trees below, I truly felt my own existence. In the evenings, I took a Spanish class at the center. The teacher was a man named Carlos, around 40, originally from Mexico, who always joked, "If you can say gracias without sounding like you're choking on a peanut, you've made progress." I was a slow learner, but I was learning. Not to impress anyone, not to prepare for anything, just because I had never done this for myself. Lena still texted me often. She sent pictures of her architecture assignments, modern house designs, sometimes with little stick figures, smiling occasionally, with a handwritten note in blue ink. "I want to design a house with a porch just like yours. Grandma." I saved every picture in a special folder on my computer. I named it Lena's Future. Every morning I woke up early. I made herbal tea. I wrote in a journal. Not long, emotional entries, but just a few sentences like a gentle nod to the new day. One time I wrote, "I used to live to be loved. Now I live to breathe." I didn't regret the love I had given my son, but I no longer wanted to pour my entire being into someone who didn't value it. I think sometimes people stay in a role because they believe it's their duty. Being a mother is like that. But some roles need to be taken off so you can breathe again. One afternoon after our painting class, Judith gave me a ride home. On the way, she said, "You know, Marjorie, I don't know who you were before, but the woman I see now is a woman who seems to be starting to like herself." I turned to her surprised. "Did you not like yourself before?" "No. I always liked being a good person, but I never knew how to be a free one." I nodded. It was as if she had voiced the very thing I hadn't yet found the words for. That evening I sat in the rocking chair on my porch, sipping peppermint tea and watching the sky darken. No loud noises, just the sound of crickets and the wind. I thought of myself no longer the groom's mother, not Arthur's wife, not Marjorie from the laundromat. Just me, a 67-year-old woman, starting to live again, and this time for herself. Lena arrived in Paulina on a Saturday morning, bringing a small rolling suitcase, a tin of gingerbread cookies she'd baked herself, and a smile I hadn't seen since before the wedding. We hugged for a long time on the front steps. I always hugged my granddaughter that way, not too tight, not quick to let go like an anchor holding on to something that truly belonged to me. Lena didn't have to say it, but I knew she hadn't come just for a vacation. She needed a space where Chase's presence didn't occupy her mind, and I understood that feeling better than anyone. For lunch, I made my old-fashioned black bean soup, sliced some sourdough bread, and the two of us ate on the back porch under the slow afternoon sun filtering through the lavender trellis. No one mentioned Chase. No one had to try to keep the conversation light. We were just there, together. That afternoon, while I was washing dishes in the kitchen, Lena called out from the living room, "Grandma, is this wooden box in the drawer yours?" "Yes, dear. It's just for odds and ends. There's an envelope in here, and it's addressed to Chase if you ever care." My hands froze in the soap suds. I knew immediately which letter she was talking about. I dried my hands and walked out. Lena was holding the letter, looking at me expectantly. I gave a small nod. Yes, it's been in there for a few months. "Are you going to send it?" I pulled out a chair and sat down, letting out a long breath. I didn't feel sad, nor did I feel relieved. Just an emotion that existed in between. Between what was and what no longer is. There was a time when I thought about sending it every day. Every time I opened my email, every time I took out a stamp, every night, I rewrote it in my head. But then I put it in that box. And day by day, I stopped thinking about sending it. Lena opened her mouth to speak, then stopped. I continued. "Some things, if they truly need to be known, a person will find out for themselves. And if they never figure it out, then a letter has no meaning." I held out my hand. She gave me the envelope. I opened it and pulled out the single sheet of paper. The ink was faded in places from how many times my fingers had held it. I read it aloud slowly, not for her but for myself, Chase. "If you ever realize that I never hated you, that I was just tired of having to prove I was worthy of your love, I'll still be here, but I'm no longer waiting." I folded the letter, put it back in the envelope, and placed it back in the wooden box. I didn't hide it away, I didn't destroy it, but I no longer had any intention of sending it. Lena was silent the whole time I was reading. She just looked at me, then slowly stood up, walked over, and hugged me from behind. Her head rested on my shoulder, her hand covering mine where it lay on my lap. Her voice was very quiet, but loud enough for me to hear. "You're the reason I believe a woman doesn't have to sacrifice herself to the point of becoming invisible." I blinked. That sentence, babe, it was what I had once needed to hear from my own son and never had. I gently squeezed Lena's hand, not looking at her because I knew if I did, I would cry. I used to think a mother's love was a thing without end. A river that flowed forever, whether it ran deep or shallow, whether it was received or not. But I have learned this sometimes, even love needs a shoreline. Not to stop, but to know how far you've come and which way to turn back. That night, after Lena was asleep, I sat on the back porch. The moon wasn't bright, but the air was cool. The lavender blossoms swayed in the soft yellow light from the porch lamp. I didn't feel like I had let go of Chase. I just felt that I had stopped placing myself where I was not allowed to exist. Tomorrow I would bake a pumpkin loaf, and if it was good enough, I would send a piece back with Lena. Not because I was a model grandmother, but because I was a woman who was starting to love herself again, without anyone's permission, without anyone's validation, without needing my name on an invitation. I always thought I would die an old woman in a small house in Raleigh, surrounded by familiar objects and an unspoken past. But as it turns out, life at 67 can still open a new chapter if you just dare to step across a threshold that's long been covered in dust. I was packing a suitcase. For the first time in my life, I was preparing for a trip that wasn't for anyone else. Not for a wedding, not for a funeral, not to visit someone, but for me. I was going on a cruise, a 10-day cruise around the Caribbean. I chose an itinerary with 3 stops: Cozumel, Mexico, St. Thomas, USV, and a day on the cruise line's private island. I didn't know exactly what I would do in each place. I just wanted to sit on the ship's deck, listen to the wind, and watch the sea, truly see it with my own eyes, not through a movie or a postcard tacked to the wall of the old laundromat. On the morning of my departure, Lena drove me to the port. We didn't talk much in the car. There was just soft music from a local radio station and the gentle thud of my suitcase rolling in the trunk with each turn. When we arrived at the terminal, Lena helped me wheel my suitcase to the check-in area, then pulled a small box from her bag. "Don't open this here. Wait until you're on the ship." I nodded and smiled. She hugged me one last time and whispered, "You have to have fun, Grandma. You don't have to do anything special. Just be comfortable." I turned away before she could see the tears welling in my eyes. On the ship, I was assigned to a dinner table with an older German couple, both retired, who traveled twice a year. They were polite, poised, and spoke in a slow, deliberate English. I answered just as slowly and at one point. I even let slip a few of the Spanish phrases I had learned in Paulina. The wife smiled and told me, "Muy bien." I laughed, surprised at how natural it felt. We talked about coffee in Europe, about the March weather, about the kind of small talk I once thought I didn't know how to participate in. But I did, without anyone by my side, without needing a role to have a place in a conversation. That evening I stood on the ship's deck. The sea was a glittering black, quieter than I had imagined. The wind wasn't cold, but soft and smooth. I stood by the railing and put my hand in my coat pocket. Inside was Lena's gift, a small wooden keychain engraved with tiny letters. "My story matters." I went still for a moment, tracing each letter with my fingertip, as if I were tracing my own veins. Then I pulled out a small piece of paper, an old photograph. It was Chase's wedding photo, a copy from their second smaller ceremony, which was simple and had no guests. Chase hadn't invited me. I hadn't asked, but the photo still found its way to me through the mail with nothing but an address on the envelope. I looked at it one last time. They were standing in front of a small restaurant, dressed simply, their smiles strained, not like a newly married couple should look. But what caught my eye were my son's eyes. The pride was gone. There was just something hollow, as if he knew that something had been lost forever. I folded the photo, held it out over the water, and then I let go. The picture fluttered away slowly like a bird with no destination. The wind carried it far out to where the sky meets the sea, where no one asks who paid for that party, where there is no mother of the groom, no shame, no unappreciated sacrifice. There was only me, and the open ocean. I rested my hands on the railing. I stood there for a long time, not thinking much, just feeling a certain emptiness in my heart being filled by the wind. I am not writing the end of my life story with some grand finale. I didn't become a symbol, nor do I need to be remembered as a kind mother who was once hurt. I am just an ordinary woman who has learned that sometimes you have to walk out of a wedding that wasn't meant for you, not for revenge, but to find the wedding with yourself. If you are still here reading these final words, I want to tell you something. It took me nearly 70 years to understand. No one owes you love simply because you have sacrificed. I used to think being a mother meant naturally enduring, naturally stepping back, naturally being ready to give unconditionally. I'm not saying that's wrong. Unconditional love, especially from a mother, is a miraculous thing. But if you give and give without being seen, without being respected, without being a whole person in the eyes of the one you love, then you are not loving. You are erasing yourself. I was a mother, a wife, a family woman, and I have no regrets about that. But my biggest regret is that I waited far too long to become me. I waited for Chase to grow up before I dared to live. I waited for my son to become successful before I thought about resting. I waited for him to say thank you before I felt I had value. But in the end, I realized no one can give you back the years you lost in silence. If you are reading this and you are a woman in your 50s, your 60s, or even retired, I want you to know you can still begin. Begin to learn something new. Begin to sever a relationship that brings you pain. Begin to forgive yourself. And begin to live not in someone else's role, but in your own true form. It took me a lifetime to be allowed to step out of the frame of the perfect mother. And you know what? When I stepped out, I didn't feel lost. I felt light. I felt the wind. I felt the sun. I felt myself. We don't need to become an icon. We just need to become ourselves again, with all our scars, our unfinished dreams, and the tenderness that was once taken for granted. My story matters. Lena engraved those words on the keychain she gave me, and I want you to remember that phrase as the simplest but most important thing. Your story matters too. You have lived long enough to know this world can be unfair. But you are also strong enough to know your worth isn't found in how others treat you, but in how you choose to move forward. If you carry a loneliness in your heart, a wound that hasn't healed, or a story like mine, please leave a few lines below. I may not know your face, but I will read them. Who knows, we may have more in common than we think. And if you know someone who needs to hear this, please share it with them. Because sometimes, all a woman needs is for another woman to tell her, I understand. And I truly, truly understand.